Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. I am so glad to see you here on this beautiful spring morning. Thank you. If you're visiting here today, I want to extend to you a special welcome. You are our honored guest, and we're so glad that you're here. If you're here in person, I invite you to stop by our welcome table just outside this door in Elliott Hall. Joining us online, please check out our website and our social media channels. We'd love to get to know you and introduce ourselves to you as well. Now for a few announcements as we begin. First, I want to give a shout out to Rick and Colleen Bliss for cleaning out the kitchen. Do y'all know they cleaned out the salt?
We've only just started.
Yes, but they cleaned out the salt and pepper shakers, okay? Like, that's a big job by itself. So yeah, I think there is still some work that needs to be done. If this sounds like your kind of jam, your way of taking care of our shared community space here, maybe you could just talk to Rick and Colleen after service, let them know that you'd love to help. Speaking of the kitchen, today's the day. We have coffee. And thank you so much to our coffee volunteers who are making it happen. We can also use more volunteers making the coffee happen for all the people. So just talk to one of them if you'd like to help. We do ask today that you take your coffee outside to drink. It's a beautiful day. We've got the doors open, and it'll be really lovely out there. So please join us out there. Next week, we will be going to mask-optional services here. Now, we do encourage mask wearing, and we do have the air filtration system here in the building to make it a little safer for everybody, but we will be going to mask-optional next week. Now, it is April, and that means, and I can hardly even believe I'm saying this year has just flown so fast, but Pride is just around the corner. It's coming up really soon. This year, our congregation will be participating in both the Pride Parade and the Pride Festival. We're going to have a booth at the festival. And we would love to have lots of volunteers sign up because it just won't happen without lots of people to staff the booth. We want to let all of the wonderful queer folks in Salt Lake City know who we are and where we are and what we represent here. So if you would like to participate, please send an email to Reverend Ian, or you can send one to me and I'll connect you. But we'd love to have your participation. Okay, here's a really important announcement about something very special that's happening next Sunday at 2:30 in the afternoon at Great Salt Lake State Park. This is not going to happen on Antelope Island. It's going to happen at Great Salt Lake State Park, which is near Saltair. We're going to have a ceremony of public witness to mourn the state of the Great Salt Lake, which, as many of you know, is disappearing. It's facing a lot of challenges, ecological challenges. So in conjunction with our sibling congregations, South Valley UU and Holiday United Church of Christ, there will be a ceremony of public witness next Sunday, 2:30 in the afternoon. We'll still have Sunday worship here. So come here, get a bite to eat, and then join us down there. We're excited to be partnering with Friends of the Great Salt Lake for children's activities, so you can bring the kids. And we will have a poetry reading by the poet Nan Seymour. She lived on Antelope Island for several months and wrote an epic poem to the island, to the lake. So she's going to share some of her poetry with us. It's $5 per car. We strongly encourage people to carpool. They prefer cash for that, for parking. Bring all of the things that you need. Shoes you can get muddy in, a hat, preferably with a net to protect you from the bugs, your reusable water bottle, and bring your open heart so that we can speak to the lake from our hearts. Now, I have one more announcement from the transition team. This is the team that selected our interim minister. They are wrapping up their work by creating the selection committee to choose the next settled minister. So I'd like to invite forward Don Walton to the pulpit, to bring us up to date on their work.
Thanks, Monica. Good morning. Well, we are at a critical point for the first time in decades as we move forward to selecting our next minister. And we have two major decisions to make in that process. Number one, we have to identify who we are as a congregation and where do we want to go in the future. We need to do that so that interviewing candidates will know what they're getting into when they come here. Second is we need to knowing that, we're going to be better able to decide what kind of person we want as that next minister to lead us into the future. So there's going to be a committee of 7 people to guide us through this 2-stage process. 7 people that you will select. But in order for you to take part in that process, you need to fill out this search committee nomination form. We're going to have some forms out here in Elliott Hall as well as out on the plaza, and you can find it online with the torch. What we want you to do is, number one, fill in your name as the submitter for that form. And then there's space for you're recommending 7 congregants to serve on that committee. So if you would like to serve on the committee, fill in the first line with your name after submitting it, because self-nominations are going to be really important. There are going to be some nominees put on the committee who are going to find out they're going to be unable to serve for some reason. But those self-nominees we already know have said that they are ready, willing, and able to serve. If you don't want to serve on the committee and you don't know 6 or 7 people to recommend, we would still ask you to please submit the form anyway with just your name on it as the submitter. We're trying to be as inclusive as possible with this process. Frankly, we have not seen much participation in this exercise so far. So in order to increase participation, this week, members of the Transition Committee are going to be calling all those who have not submitted a form. So please submit your form, even if it's just as a submitter. And if you have any questions, I'll be out there in Elliott Hall and on the plaza to help you as well as to fill out the form. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. So everybody got that? Everybody fills out a form, even if you don't know who to nominate. Everybody fills out a form. Thank you. Thanks in advance. Today, we also welcome to the pulpit our Director of Religious Education, Amanda Esko, and this week's lay minister, Carole Straughn, who will be sharing reflections with us from the pulpit. For now, we begin our service with the lighting of the chalice, the sacred flame that illuminates Unitarian Universalist worship services around the globe. Today, I bring something a little bit longer, but really sweet, by Jan Richardson. When you are lost in your own life, when the landscape you have known falls away, when your familiar path becomes foreign and you find yourself a stranger in the story you had held most dear, then let yourself be lost. Let yourself leave for a place whose contours you do not already know. whose cadences you have not learned by heart. Let yourself land on a threshold that mirrors the mystery of your own bewildered soul. It will come as a surprise, what arrives to welcome you through the door, making a place for you at the table and calling you by your name. Let what comes, come. Let the glass be filled. Let the light be tended. Let the hands lay before you what will meet you in your hunger. Let the laughter, let the sweetness that enters, the sorrow, let the solace that comes as sustenance and sudden, unbidden grace. For what comes, offer gladness. For what greets you with kindly welcome, offer thanks. Offer blessing for those who gathered you in and will not be forgotten. Those who, when you were a stranger, made a place for you at the table and called you by your name.
Last week, I offered prayers. As Unitarian Universalists, though, we don't rest on prayers alone. Our faith is lived in our actions out in the world. Today, I'm inviting our entire congregation to participate in what the religious education team has been calling the Pronoun Project. In February, a parent came to our religious education team meeting concerned about the legislation that would ultimately pass, restricting transgender children from participating in sports. This parent was familiar with the startling statistics facing these youth. According to a 2018 American Academy of Pediatrics study, 50% of transgender boys, 29% of transgender girls, and 41% of non-binary youth attempt suicide before the age of 24. Our transgender youth are struggling to survive, and this legislation will hurt them. These statistics are alarming. The Trevor Project, a nonprofit group focused on advocacy, research, education, and crisis counseling for LGBTQ youth, wanted more information on what suicide prevention strategies were helpful for these youth. Last July, they released their study, and the results were shocking and simple. Hello, my name is Amanda, and my pronouns are she, her. Youth that are able to identify their own name and pronouns and be respected attempt suicide less. From the study, non-binary youth reported that, quote, no one that respected their pronouns had more than 2.5 times the rate of attempting suicide compared to those who reported that all or most people they know respected their pronouns. The rate of attempting suicide in a year dropped to 15% when a lot of people respected their pronouns, and then 10% when all or most people respected their pronouns. Pronouns save lives. So that's what we're asking all of you to do. Save lives by creating a community culture based on inclusivity. After worship, you'll find a table set outside where you can design and make your own pronoun pin or take one that's already made. See? She, her. Use the pronouns you see other people wear. When you're here at First Church, look at the name tags. Use people's names. Use their pronouns. If you are a leader in our community and you are leading meetings, start your introductions with your name and pronouns. This is something I, too, am actively working on. It's easy to forget, but simple to put in practice. Normalizing identifying pronouns for everyone helps make this sacred space a place where everyone feels accepted, respected, and seen. May it be so.
On the evening of April 4th, 1968, 54 years ago, our 1-year-old son was playing on the floor of our rent house in Austin, Texas, while my husband, Harold, and I discussed what to do now that he had been fired as editor of the Christian Chronicle, our church's international newspaper. I was a full-time mom, and with both of us just out of graduate school, we had a lot of debt. In the background, a radio played. Then the music stopped, and the news struck like a thunderbolt. Dr. Martin Luther King was dead, shot, on the balcony of his motel, while asking that his favorite hymn be played at the meeting that night. Precious Lord, take my hand. Harold said, I want to go to the funeral. Yes, you must, I urged him. So we took our last few dollars in savings and sent him on the 20-hour bus ride to Atlanta, Georgia. My heart went with him, and my stomach felt like I was falling without a safety net. Then I thought, the Lord will provide, and if he doesn't, so be it. I had to let Harold go to Dr. King's funeral so we could be in solidarity with all the kind, courageous people on the wrong side of the color line. Our predicament was nothing in comparison to the hideous conditions they lived with every day. Our friend, Evelyn, a black single mother raising 2 children on factory wages, was paying just as much for her dangerous, dilapidated tenement rooms as we did for our safe, clean ones. Dr. King, who led a movement based on love and nonviolence, had his house bombed. I had to let Harold go to Dr. King's funeral because, like Dr. King, Harold refused to surrender to the forces that wanted him to stop speaking truth. The truth he had written about in the Christian Chronicle. in the article that got him fired. It had all started when we learned that Southwestern Christian College, our church's historically black college, had a new president, Dr. Jack Evans, and he was black, the first in the college's 2-decade history. When Harold and I went to interview President Evans, we learned of the bold new actions his administration was taking to build up the college. In contrast, the college's previous regime, all white, had merely feathered their own nest while making sure the college limped along only well enough to supply an excuse for white Christian colleges to exclude blacks. For example, white teachers there got paid significantly more than black teachers. Even the white president's secretary, his own wife, was paid more than any of the black faculty. Furthermore, the white administration had forbidden the college to use a fundraising strategy that succeeds for so many historically black colleges and universities, where you take your student chorus on a tour, performing in black churches, and the offerings pour forth. Church members love their young people and often give beyond what seems possible. Under the leadership of President Evans, the college was thriving. Black faculty now got the same salaries as white faculty. Money was being raised to renovate and build new buildings. Soon after this news got out to the Christian Chronicle's 25,000 subscribers, many readers were thrilled, but one person took umbrage. The immediate past president of the Black College was angry that his oppressive practices had been exposed. He threatened a libel suit for $100,000, almost $1 million in today's money, if A, the article were not retracted, or if not, B, if Harold were not fired. Since Harold knew the article was true in every detail, he refused to retract it. And since the company would be ruined by the lawsuit, even if they won, the owner fired Harold. On April 9th, Harold marched with 50,000 other mourners in Dr. King's 3-mile funeral procession from the Ebenezer Baptist Church to Morehouse College, where Mahalia Jackson sang, "Precious Lord, take my hand." While Harold was gone, I took a phone call for him. When he came home and returned the call, he was offered a job in Abilene, Texas, writing radio and television programs for our church, our conservative Protestant church. Just to clarify, not a Unitarian church. So that job started immediately and lasted a decade. Harold and his like-minded cohorts created a sea change in our conservative church. For example, the very paper that fired him soon covered a huge conference on racial justice and reconciliation in the church. And in 2019 even, it was still covering our black churches. It covered the funeral and life story of Black College President Jack Evans. Dr. King once said, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." And I believe he knew, and all of us here know that we all have to help bend it.
Yes, we do, Carole. This church has been trying to bend that arc for a very long time. It depends entirely on the contributions of its generous members and friends. So as the plates come around today, I encourage you to give generously in support of this church's values and mission, and thank you. It's allergy season. I'm trying not to surrender to my allergies. Our theme for this month is surrender. I think Amanda and Carole each had something really important to say, even if it wasn't directly related to surrender, but I'm just so grateful to hear these voices from our pulpit. Isn't it a treat? Yeah. Now, at sundown on Friday night, millions of Muslims around the world began their annual fast that we know as Ramadan. Ramadan is a month of fasting and purification, which is one of the 5 obligations of Muslims. Now, I have to admit, I'm not really cut out for complete fasting. I just don't have that particular flavor of self-discipline. And yet, I too am fasting in a way, because as a Christian, I'm observing Lent right now. I decided to give up meat this year. So for 40 days, I'm a vegetarian, and I'm doing pretty good so far. Haven't had any meat yet. It's a lot easier than it was the last time I was a vegetarian, like 20 years ago. There is a lot more options now than just tofu or tofurkey, right? Lots of meat alternatives and lots more cookbooks and just more acceptance for vegetarianism generally. I mean, you can get a good veggie burger at Burger King now. Who would have thought, right? Well, Lent and Ramadan have one thing in common. They're not just about deprivation. They're about surrender. People sometimes associate Lent with like giving up chocolate or something. But a meaningful fast will ask you to give up something that's really something you will miss in order to make space to learn something or remember something about who you really are. Now, I love to cook, as we've talked about here before, and I'm from the South, so giving up meat means giving up a lot of the meals that feel like home to me. But I'm just a little over halfway to Easter now, and I'm remembering so much. I'm remembering that I'm part of a life cycle, and not just the top part either. I'm remembering that something has to die in order for me to live, and someday I will become food too. As I work through all of these various meat alternatives, I remember that our food system is broken. These foods are labor and water intensive to produce. They're not produced locally. They still have to travel long distances to get to me. And that reminds me that we cannot consume our way out of a climate crisis. These are lessons that probably would elude me if I had not been intentional about my diet for these 40 days. By the same token, Ramadan reminds Muslims that so much of what we receive is a gift, is a privilege. By not eating all day, Muslims are reminded that there are millions of people for whom not having anything to eat is a daily reality. By feasting at night with family, they are reminded how important family really is. They're Routines. Their routines are upended, and they are thrust into sacred time when life rotates around prayer, not around the clock or the news cycle or the stock market. Fasting gets the headlines during Ramadan, but prayer is where the action really is. Now, my experience is that Unitarian Universalists are not all that crazy about the notion of prayer. And I used to be the same way, because I grew up knowing so many people who believed in God as sort of a wish-granting genie. You know the one, the God who opens up a parking space right at the front of the lot just when you're in a hurry. Yes, thank you, Lord. The God who orders one's steps and who has a plan for your life. In that universe, when things are going well, it's because we're blessed. And when things are not going well, you just turn it all over to God because it must be part of the plan. But that's not the universe we really live in. That's a cop-out that keeps us from being mature about our problems. Sometimes terrible things happen, and there is no reason why. There's no plan. Our steps are fumbling and chaotic because we have so much less control over the way things are than we let ourselves believe. And just when we think we've got life figured out, here comes some new thing to pull the rug out from under us. I remember some advice a friend gave me once, that a problem isn't really a problem if you can throw money at it and make it go away. But there are problems that simply do not respond to money. People go through their whole lives unable to talk to anyone about the abuse they've suffered, child abuse, sexual assault, bullying, people living with chronic illness, so that every step, every movement brings pain. People falling just a little deeper into the seduction of addiction every day, needing one more drink to sleep at night, half a pill more to control the pain, a secret password-protected file hidden on their laptop, a credit card always on the verge of maxing out. Death and illness no more than a breath away for any of us. People with money just as terrified as people without it, just with more illusions of choice and control. I guarantee you that each of these people is represented in our church. I know this not because of any confidential knowledge entrusted to me, but simply because we are humans, and these are human problems. Unitarian Universalists are no less likely than any other religious people to come to church with a smile on our faces and pretend like everything is fine, and then go home and cry with worry before lunch. The question is, when tragedy arrives on our doorstep, when life spins out of control, will we have any spiritual resources with which to meet the moment? Islam taught me how to look at prayer very differently. Several years ago, while I was living in Alabama, we had a drought. And what do governors do in conservative states when there's a drought? Pray for rain, that's right. Our governor called on all Alabamians to pray for rain, as if we could alter global weather patterns in our favor with just our words. So much easier than changing our policies to halt climate change, right? Let's ask God for a miracle. But something different happened to me that year in that drought. Not far from where I lived was a mosque, a big mosque that was very active in the Birmingham community, especially when it came to feeding hungry people. And they heard the call from the governor to pray for rain, and so they invited everyone in the area to come to the mosque and join in a community prayer. When I got there that day, it was hard to find a parking space. Even though their lot was vast, almost every spot was occupied. I walked to the far side where the members of the mosque had blocked off the space for prayer and were laying out rows and rows of prayer mats. Every visitor was offered a mat. And so I chose one in the middle, took off my shoes, and knelt down on the mat. I had no idea what I was doing, but the women on either side of me assured me that they would help me know what to do. At noon, the imam turned on the PA system and welcomed everyone to the mosque. There were hundreds of people kneeling there on the pavement, Muslims of every age and gender, but also many other people, Christians and Jews, people who lived in the neighborhood, people from everywhere. Some were kneeling on beach towels, some kneeling on the bare pavement, but we were all kneeling. And then the imam turned away from us and began to pray into the microphone, his arms stretched out wide, his face lifted toward the sky. I didn't know what he was saying, but it was majestic and moving. And then the whole crowd bowed down and we touched our heads to the ground. And something happened to me while I was down there. I had never been face down on the ground before God. I had never lowered my whole self onto the earth for God. I had definitely never done those things with hundreds of other people around me. I was not just praying with my mind, I was praying with my whole body. And actually, I was not praying. We were praying. This self that I had thought of as me dissolved for a moment, and I became part of this community that had invited me and welcomed me. I wasn't thinking so much about whether we were actually going to make it rain, as the governor had requested. I was only thinking about the earth, my head, my body, these people. I knew that I could not, with my words, even with my body, make it rain. But I could get in touch with my helplessness about climate change, about where my food comes from, about being part of a world that is dying. Shiraz Janjua is an author best known for his writing on film and social media, but he's also a practicing Muslim, and he also has this ambivalence about prayer. He describes his daily practice like this: I stand a few paces behind the prayer rug, this portable sacred space, and I merely look at it, thinking about what I'll do there, who I'll meet there. I let my arms hang at my sides and face the wall before me, let my face relax, and then I step forward onto the rug and stand on the threadbare fabric. A shot of breath. Toes edge over the tip of the diving platform. I look down at the surface of the water, 10 meters below. It's a long drop. Janjua reminds his readers that the word Islam means surrender. To be a Muslim is to surrender to God. But people in our culture, Muslim or otherwise, have negative connotations of this word. It sounds defeatist, like giving up. Or Janjua says surrender means letting someone get the better of us. Surrender is something that armies and fugitives do. It's utterly incompatible with self-respecting 21st century individualism. We don't entertain phantoms in the sky, and we don't conform to backward theocratic groupthink. Surrender, submit, bah. In this world, you've got to stand up for yourself or be destroyed. Every man for himself. Dog eat dog. Never give up. Never surrender. This is what we're up against. I show up for prayer anyway. Janjua says, because my hope is stubborn, because my part of the bargain is showing up. I'm often disappointed by my approach or by the silence that greets me, so I run away. But sometimes I find myself running until the oxygen escapes, and I hunch over to catch my breath, and I finally ask myself what the point of running even is. Maybe I don't need to run. Maybe we can face the darkness together, here, now. By coincidence, I found myself reading another author this week who compared surrender to diving. Kate Bowler, who in her new book, No Cure for Being Human, describes being diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer at the age of 37. A mother of a toddler, a professor at Duke University with papers to publish and classes to teach, she did not have time for this. But when you hear your doctor tell you that you have less than a year to live, you find that you suddenly have a very different relationship to time. The day that Bowler is scheduled to get a chemotherapy pump inserted into her chest, she permits herself only one thought: this will only be terrible for a moment. As she sits waiting, the swirl of doctors and nurses preparing for the procedure around her, she says, I imagine that I am at the end of a familiar dock, my toes curled over the edge, ready to dive into a glacier lake. Even in the heat of summer, that cold demands complete capitulation as you are swallowed whole by a bottomless blue hospital gown, blue surgical head covering, blue starched hospital sheets pulled up to my chin, blue slipper socks that you somehow wake up wearing. Everyone seems to be proceeding under the assumption that their luck is guaranteed once they've hit, middle class, Bowler writes. No one seems to understand that everyone's life hangs by a thread. She talks about a conversation with her therapist. As she prepares for another round of surgeries, he tells her a secret from hikers on the Appalachian Trail, that the hardest day of the hike is the first day, when it dawns on them that they will have to go months with the weight they are carrying, and some of it will have to be left behind. He says to her, this will be a hard journey. Is there anything you can set down? Sooner or later, each of us will stand at the edge of that diving platform with nowhere to go but off into the blue. When that moment arrives for us, will we freak out? Will we run in panicked circles, deliriously grasping around for control? Or will we simply breathe and set our footing for the leap because we have stood on the end of that diving board many times before, practicing how to surrender? What can you set down today, right now? Whether you are suffering now or have suffered in the past, can you set down your desire to control everything? Set down your defensiveness. Let go of certainty. Release your worry about needing to have it all together. Dive into the present moment, the vulnerability of it, the cold of complete capitulation to it. This is all we have. This is all we need. Everything else can be surrendered. May it be so. once again, thank you so much for making time to be here today. Let us extinguish our chalice today with these words by Jiddu Krishnamurti. To be free comes not from changing or fixing this world, but from seeing this world as it is and opening the heart in the midst of it.